Women after 60. Listen. This is how wise women get men to change. Have you ever watched your husband stubbornly resist changes that could improve his life, health, or happiness while feeling powerless to help without starting another argument? Today, we're exploring 5 gentle but powerful moves that wise women over 60 use to inspire positive changes in their partners without nagging, ultimatums, or the exhausting power struggles that can damage decades-long relationships. At 68, my mother discovered something that transformed her 22-year marriage to my father. Dad had become increasingly set in his ways, avoiding social gatherings, dismissing health concerns, and growing defensive whenever Mom tried to suggest improvements. Every well-intentioned conversation had turned into resistance, making him more stubborn and her more frustrated. Then something shifted. Instead of continuing the same approaches that weren't working, Mom began using what she called invisible influence. Methods so subtle that Dad thought every positive change was his own brilliant idea. Within a year, this man who had resisted doctor visits for a decade was scheduling regular checkups. The husband who had become a hermit was hosting dinner parties. The father who had dismissed technology was video calling grandchildren across the country. These weren't manipulation tactics or games. They were sophisticated approaches based on understanding male psychology at this stage of life, respecting autonomy while still caring deeply, and using the wisdom that comes with decades of observing how people actually change. Carl Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But transformation has to be mutual and voluntary, not forced from the outside. If you've ever felt frustrated trying to help someone you love make positive changes, or if you want to learn the gentle art of influence that comes with mature feminine wisdom, hit that subscribe button, because what we're discussing today could save your relationships while still getting the results you care about.
Move number 1. She models the change instead of demanding it. Rather than telling him what he should do differently, she simply starts doing it herself and lets the results speak louder than any lecture could. When Dad started complaining about feeling tired and achy all the time, Mom's first instinct was to suggest exercise, better nutrition, and more sleep. But years of experience had taught her that direct suggestions would be met with defensive explanations about why those things wouldn't work for him. Instead, she quietly began taking evening walks around their neighborhood. She started preparing more colorful, nutrient-rich meals for herself and began talking enthusiastically about how much better she felt. She never mentioned that Dad should join her or change his habits. She simply lived differently and let the results show. Within 3 weeks, Dad asked if he could join her walks. For companionship, he said, though Mom suspected he was curious about why she seemed so much more energetic. Within a month, he was asking for seconds of the healthier meals she prepared. 6 months later, he'd lost 12 pounds and was bragging to neighbors about their new lifestyle. This approach worked because it removed the dynamic of teacher-student or parent-child that makes mature men defensive. Instead of feeling criticized or managed, Dad got to observe the benefits firsthand and make his own choice to participate. There was no loss of autonomy, no wounded pride, no resistance to overcome. Dr. Albert Bandura's research on social learning theory shows that people learn more effectively through observation than through instruction. When you model the behavior you want to see, you're teaching without preaching, influencing without controlling. The key is genuine authenticity. You can't fake enthusiasm for changes you're only making to manipulate someone else. But when you genuinely embrace improvements for your own well-being and let the benefits show naturally, others often become curious about joining you. Mom's approach also shifted the dynamic from "you need to change" to "we're both growing." Instead of one person being the problem and the other being the solution, they became partners in positive change. Have you ever noticed how much more appealing something becomes when someone else is enjoying it rather than pushing it on you? Share an example from your own experience in the comments.
Move number 2. She asks questions instead of giving advice. When he shares a problem or concern, instead of immediately offering solutions, she asks thoughtful questions that help him discover his own answers. Dad had been complaining for months about back pain, but refused to see a doctor, insisting it would go away on its own. Mom's previous attempts to convince him to seek help had resulted in arguments and increased stubbornness. He'd dig in deeper every time she suggested medical attention. Then Mom changed her approach entirely. The next time Dad mentioned his back pain, instead of saying, "You need to see a doctor," she asked gently, "What do you think might be causing it?" When he speculated about his old office chair or sleeping position, she followed up with curious questions like, "How long has that chair been bothering you?" Or, "What do you think would help you sleep more comfortably?" Through a series of patient, non-judgmental questions over several conversations, Dad talked himself into seeing a doctor, replacing his office chair, and starting gentle stretching exercises. He never felt pushed or pressured. He felt heard and supported in his own problem-solving process. This technique worked because it honored Dad's need for autonomy and competence. Men over 60 have decades of experience solving problems, and they respond better to being trusted with solutions than being told what to do. Socratic questioning also helps people examine their own resistance and work through their own barriers. When someone discovers an answer through their own thinking process, they're much more committed to acting on it than when the answer is imposed from outside. Mom learned that the art lies in asking questions that guide without leading, that explore without interrogating. Questions like, "What concerns you most about that?" Or, "What do you think your options are?" invite reflection rather than defensiveness. The goal isn't to manipulate him into the answer you want, it's to help him access his own wisdom and problem-solving abilities. Often people already know what they need to do. They just need space to arrive at that conclusion without feeling controlled. Move number 3. She creates positive associations with the change. Instead of focusing on what's wrong or what needs fixing, she connects the desired change to things he already values and enjoys. After Dad retired, he became increasingly isolated, declining social invitations and spending most days alone in his workshop. Mom was concerned about his mental health, but knew that lecturing about the importance of social connection would only make him more resistant. Instead of criticizing his hermit tendencies, Mom found ways to connect social activities to Dad's existing interests. Knowing he loved woodworking and was proud of his craftsmanship, she mentioned that their neighbor, Tom, had been asking about Dad's technique for refinishing antique furniture. She framed potential gatherings around shared meals featuring Dad's favorite foods, invited people she knew he genuinely found interesting, and made sure he had comfortable ways to participate without feeling performed upon. When organizing dinner parties, she'd mentioned specific topics she knew would engage him, or people who shared his hobbies. Rather than, "You need to get out more," Mom's message became, "Here are opportunities to share your expertise with people who would appreciate it." The focus shifted from his deficiency to enriching opportunities that happened to involve other people. Dr. Amy Cuddy's research on influence shows that people are more likely to change when they can connect new behaviors to their existing identity and values. When change feels consistent with who they already are, resistance disappears. This approach required Mom's deep knowledge of what Dad actually cared about, enjoyed, and valued. It wasn't manipulation, it was understanding him well enough to present opportunities in ways that aligned with his authentic interests. The change became something he wanted to do rather than something he should do, which made all the difference in both adoption and sustainability. Within 6 months, Dad was regularly hosting workshop visits and had rekindled several old friendships.
Move number 4. She celebrates small steps instead of pointing out what's missing. When progress happens, no matter how small, she notices it, appreciates it, and makes it feel significant rather than focusing on how much further there is to go. When Dad finally agreed to take a daily multivitamin after months of Mom's gentle encouragement, her instinct was to immediately add suggestions about exercise, better sleep habits, and regular checkups. Instead, she celebrated this one change as if it were a major victory. "I'm so glad you're taking care of yourself," she told him genuinely. "I feel less worried knowing you're giving your body what it needs." She mentioned it positively to me and my siblings, making Dad feel appreciated rather than managed. 3 months later, Dad started taking those evening walks with Mom. 6 months after that, he scheduled his first physical in 5 years. Each change felt like his own idea, built on the foundation of feeling successful and appreciated for previous changes. B.F. Skinner's research on positive reinforcement shows that behaviors followed by positive consequences are more likely to continue and expand. When Mom celebrated Dad's small steps, she was reinforcing his identity as someone who makes good health decisions. The key was making sure her appreciation felt genuine rather than manipulative. Dad could sense the difference between authentic gratitude and performative praise designed to shape his behavior. Mom also learned to focus on the behavior rather than the outcome she ultimately wanted. Instead of saying, "Great, now what about exercise?" she said, "I love that you're prioritizing your health." This made each step feel complete and valuable in itself rather than just a means to an end. This approach built momentum because each success created confidence for the next change. Dad began seeing himself as someone who was capable of positive change, which made additional changes feel more possible and appealing. Move number 5. She withdraws attention from what she doesn't want. Rather than arguing against negative behaviors, she simply becomes less available for complaints, negativity, or discussions that go nowhere. Dad had developed a habit of spending our family dinners complaining about politics, current events, and various frustrations. Mom's attempts to redirect these conversations or counter his negativity had only led to longer debates and more entrenched positions. Then Mom discovered the power of strategic disengagement. When Dad launched into familiar complaints, she would politely excuse herself to check on dinner, make a phone call, or attend to something else. She didn't argue or criticize, she simply made herself unavailable for the conversation. When Dad shared positive stories, asked about other family members, or engaged in constructive discussion, Mom was fully present, engaged, and responsive. She laughed at his jokes, asked follow-up questions, and gave him her complete attention. Within a few weeks, Dad's conversation style began shifting. He still had opinions and concerns, but he started expressing them differently, looking for Mom's engagement rather than just venting frustration. Family dinners became more pleasant for everyone. This approach worked because it honored Dad's right to his feelings while protecting Mom's right to choose how she spent her emotional energy. She wasn't trying to control his thoughts or silence his concerns. She was simply choosing not to be an audience for negativity that served no constructive purpose.
Psychologist Dr. John Gottman's research shows that relationships thrive when positive interactions outnumber negative ones by at least 5 to 1. By withdrawing attention from negative patterns and increasing attention for positive ones, Mom was shifting their overall interaction ratio. The beauty of this approach is that it requires no confrontation, explanation, or justification. Mom simply became selectively available, and Dad naturally began adapting his communication style to maintain her engagement. Have you ever noticed how people change their behavior based on what gets your attention? Sometimes the most powerful influence is simply choosing what we respond to. Share your observations in the comments.
These 5 moves, modeling change, asking questions, creating positive associations, celebrating progress, and withdrawing attention from negativity, worked because they respected Dad's autonomy while still caring about his well-being. Mom didn't try to control Dad's choices, but she created conditions where positive choices felt more appealing and rewarding than negative ones. She influenced without demanding, guided without controlling, and supported without enabling. The transformation in their relationship was remarkable. Instead of the mother-child dynamic that had been developing, they returned to being partners who supported each other's growth. Dad felt respected and appreciated rather than managed and criticized. Most importantly, the changes Dad made were sustainable because they felt like his own decisions. He wasn't performing to please Mom or avoid conflict. He was living according to values and preferences he'd discovered through her gentle guidance. Viktor Frankl wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Mom's approach honored that freedom while creating circumstances that made positive choices more attractive. These techniques aren't manipulative because they're based on genuine love and respect. The goal isn't to control someone, but to create conditions where they can become their best self freely and joyfully. If watching my parents' transformation inspired you to try these gentle but powerful approaches in your own relationships, make sure you're subscribed for more insights about mature love and the art of positive influence. Share this with any woman who's struggling to help someone she loves make positive changes. And remember, the most powerful influence often feels invisible to the person being influenced, and that's exactly what makes it so effective.